Hello and welcome back. Today we will be doing another book restoration, and this time it is a well-loved classic, Little Women. The client's main concern for the book was that it was falling apart. It was literally being held together by tape and a prayer. Pages had already fallen out and they were missing, and I knew this was going to be a slightly extensive repair, but I was very up to the challenge. Here I'm just removing the tape and it came off rather easily. I didn't have to use anything to get it to come off. You can see how yellow the tape is. That shows that it is acidic, and that's what's causing those dark marks on the book cover itself. I wasn't able to get those marks off because the cover was absorbing anything I put on it, but I felt like the integrity of the book was more important than making it look brand new, and so I just decided to leave them. So here I'm removing the end papers because they had Sharpie all over them, and I did not want the chemicals in the Sharpies to cause damage in the future, and we had talked about it, and she was cool with me getting rid of the end papers and replacing them. I also thought it would make the book look a lot cleaner. Next, I take a water vinegar solution I use on most of the books when I start cleaning them to get a little layer of the dirt off, but I quickly noticed that this solution was being absorbed by the book cover because it was so porous, so I moved on to reinforcing the edges with PVA glue. Now that everything is cleaned up and reinforced around the edges, I want to reinforce the hinges. I'm taking Japanese kozo or Japanese mulberry paper and some PVA glue mixed with methyl cellulose to make sure that hinge is rebuilt because the goal is to give it stability. Of course, there's going to be other steps in the future that I'm going to do, but this step to me is vital to give it a base so that everything else has a good foundation because it will continue falling apart if the hinge is quite literally on half of this book not there. At this point, you're probably wondering, what is she doing? And I have to be honest, I don't know. I just know that I needed a way to hook these two pieces back together. And the best way I could think of was putting mull onto the hinge so it would be basically invisible once all of the parts are back together. After doing so much research and being in school and running my own business for a while, I have come to the conclusion that there's no distinctly correct way to do any of this. And you have to work on a case by case basis. And your judgment, based on your knowledge and prior knowledge of the subject, is really going to be key in how to do these repairs. Except for duct tape, which is never a valid response to a book falling apart, and I'm pretty sure that is the 11th commandment that God gave, so just putting that out there. Here I am gently peeling off the paper, and some of the glue came off with it, but I ended up putting methyl cellulose to get the rest of this off. I simply forgot to film that part. And here is the pages after everything is cleaned off of it. You can see a lot of damage. Now for the most time-consuming part of this whole process, repairing signatures. You can see some of the signatures are still put together fine, but there are a lot of them that need to be repaired. And how I do my repairs is to take the Kozo and I cut strips for this. If the actual rip is going to be seen, I suggest ripping the Kozo instead of cutting it with a knife. If you rip it, the little hairs and fibers that come off the edge, they can be uh, kind of blended into the paper, and then you will barely see the repair. But because this was going to be on the spine and it would be quicker for me to cut all of them, no one's ever going to see the repairs anyway because they're on the inside of the book. I was fine saving myself a little bit of time and cutting these strips. So once I have all of the signatures kind of in order, I go through and make sure that the pages I am putting together are actually supposed to be together. Because in a signature, the first page is not going to immediately connect to the second page. There's a numbering system, and every book is going to be different, so you really have to pay attention to this part. Here I am adding the glue and then I'm putting the paper on top of it, and I might go and add a little bit of glue to the top of the paper. It kind of depends. And for the glue, I'm using methyl cellulose and PVA glue. However, you can use wheat starch, you can use rice starch. Those involve cooking it, and I was a little bit rushed for time on some of these days, so I ended up just using the methyl cellulose again with the PVA. Here is a before and after for a few of the signatures, and you can just see the difference, and I love it. And then after all of the signatures were done, they just looked completely different. Next, I am marking where the holes originally were, or at least as close to them as possible. There were a few that I didn't actually re-poke because of just how I felt that day, and I am adding all of the lines and marks to the rest of the pile. While I do have the video of me poking the holes, I decided not to add it here because it is very, very blurry and off-center. It is on TikTok if you want to see it and figure out what happened to that video. Go right ahead. But here is after I poked the holes, and then here is it in the press because I wanted to compress it down before I started sewing. The pages had expanded a little bit and I needed it to fit back in the original case. Here I am measuring the string. I measure one length for every signature I have, and then half of the length for the tails. So for this book, I did a kettle Coptic stitch, which to me is one of the easier of the stitches to do, and it's pretty, but you're not going to see it anyway, so even if you mess it up, it's still a really sturdy stitch to do. However, you're going to want to have a crescent needle for this, because if you don't, it's going to get very annoying very fast. So here we are adding glue over everything because we want it to adhere together, and it stabilizes it, but it's also going to give us something to have the mull to attach to later. I usually add 2 to 3 layers of glue before I add the mull. I'm not sure how many I actually recorded myself doing, but I always let the layers dry before adding a new layer. So here is a moment of do as I say and not as I do. I forgot to trim the little inch off of either side, and it didn't dawn on me until after I finished gluing, so I had to trim them after it had dried, which is a pain, but it can still be done. I suggest making it a little bit smaller than your text block to get it to the right size. I also suggest having your glue when you put it down a little bit tacky and then go over the top of the mull with more glue, which then dries into a really solid piece. Once that has dried, we're going to put glue on the cover side that we're going to start with and press the mull into it. Then we're going to cover the mull again with glue, just like we did with the text block. The next step is to cover the back panel in glue, and then I am putting two end papers that I off camera put together and measured and cut, and I'm going to press that down in there, smooth it out, and then add a piece of paper or a folder, whatever is on hand, to make sure that glue that might come out does not stick to the rest of the book, and hopefully it will keep it from messing up in the future. I like just having that as a precaution. Once I've done that to the other side, I will put it in the book press and let it sit overnight so everything adheres and is fully dry before we start messing with it anymore. And that is it. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to just explore the world of books and my chaotic way of putting them back together. If you're interested in seeing more, check us out on TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram at ArcFest Hollow, and we'll be back next time. Bye!